Hello and welcome to another video. So we're covering the World Grand Prix decks. We've only got a couple of them to cover. We're going to cover Feg's World Grand Prix First Mysteria deck, which is this deck we're covering for this video, and our next one will actually be the Blood deck that both Potwasher and Feg used as the both first and second place winners for the event. So that's pretty cool. They're both using base, I think it was like an exact identical deck, so I did check them and that looked to be the case. But this Mysteria deck mainly piqued my interest because it's different to a lot of Mysteria decks I had seen in the way of Chain of Calling, not usually ran in Mysteria deck that I have seen, so it's nice to see that. Truth Adjudication is kind of an iffy one normally, but they were running that as well. And of course this is based more around a tournament meta, so you can't obviously expect this to perform identically as it would on there to ladder, although it does have a lot of similarities because this deck does have a lot of variety to begin with, so it's no big shock there. But overall, a lot of success with this deck. Pretty easy to play, as most Mysteria decks are, as long as you don't misplay your draws, which I still do pretty regularly. You'll probably see that in this video. Small errors happen. If you were playing in a tournament, you'd want to mitigate those errors as much as possible and try and make as few mistakes, but as far as on ladder go, 1 or 2 mistakes usually isn't the death of you, so that's always fun. But we'll get right into it and check this out. So our first game is going to be up against Dragon, which is actually a pretty fair matchup as far as things go, because Dragon is again one of the top decks that was also taken to the World Grand Prix. I would have loved to have shown off a Dragon deck from the World Grand Prix. Both Potwatcher and Feg had slightly different variations using a very similar core, just different kind of tech choices, and while I would love to cover that, I am just missing a few of the legendaries that it's just not worth crafting yet, so unfortunately we won't be covering that until at least probably next expansion if it is still doing well. But as far as things go, this Mysteria deck had a lot of fun with. Starting off with Ann's always important. If you want to get the best out of this deck, you want to really aim for Omen as your opener. Going for that 2-drop really does help, since it does guarantee a Mysteria card draw. And we did end up getting an Omen, so it's a little late, but it should work out. And our opponent has set up a pretty ideal board to clear here with the Nova Flare. This is where Nova Flare does come in very, very handy in both the Blood and Dragon matchup typically, as it's a very effective clear for low-cost followers. Now taking the Poseidon and Pure-Hearted route, which pretty insane cards. If you guys did tune into the World Grand Prix Finals, you would have seen that that was kind of the winning final combination. The difference between $1 million and 200,000, so pretty impressive how good Poseidon and Pure-Hearted can be. At least one of the two will be rotating out in the next few weeks, or in the next, actually within the next week, as of this video going up for you guys. So opponent went pretty decently. I mean, they've got an okay board. Our Chain of Calling though should be pretty good. We should be able to clear this out and get a pretty decent Mysteria boost going, along with Spell boost. I really do love Grey, and it looks like we are getting a lot more Mysteria support come next expansion. It'll be great fun to mess around with those a little bit. Of course, it's getting really hard to thin cards out of Mysteria decks, so unless something big changes, it's going to be really difficult to find open slots. I mean, Consecration in this deck in particular will be swapping something out for, because that's going in rotation. But as far as everything else goes, it's a pretty open area. So we're looking at a very good hand here. I also wasn't too worried about going to 9 cards at this point. We've got what I'd consider a extremely good hand. Burning a single card to get a Mysterian right, I feel like is definitely worthwhile in the situation that we're in. Serpent Drake, also quite a good card. And it looks like they're going to do very well with it. Luckily we've got plenty of clear, so removing this is pretty much a non-issue. I would have actually liked that Mysteria knowledge, so a little disappointing. While I don't mind burning one card, that was probably one of the worst ones I could have burned there. Right now we're just aiming for Mysteria cards as we get set up. So double Fiery Embrace will wipe this board. Probably could have saved them a little bit longer, but we have got a Seraphic Blade as well, so it's not really a big deal, and we're going extremely wide as we go into the final couple of turns before we finish out this game with an Ann Sorcery as our big finisher. And next turn we're going to have plenty of Mysteria plays, so it really isn't a big deal. For them to wipe this entire board and be effectively clear, it would be really hard. It'll actually be quite impressive. So they get one. Raging Dragon, that's another good way to do it. So it looks like they are going to get the full clear here. Very impressed. Unfortunately, it's not really going to be enough for them, as we can pretty easily deal with this, especially drawing Knight of Mysteria. So we're going to get these Light Mages for free. Our odds of getting a removal spell are pretty reasonable. So getting Mysteria Missile, when it's a 50-50 and we have 2 draws, the odds were in our favour a fair bit there. So we can wipe their entire board with only 2 cards left and guaranteed lethal thanks to and sorcery next turn, I believe. I believe it's set 15. 16. So well and truly enough to finish this off, pretty much no matter what.
It won't be long now.
Nothing else they can do. The and sorcery winning us this game very comfortably. It's why I enjoy this deck so much and why I've covered so many Mysteria videos in the last month, as it's just been absolutely nuts since the mini expansion. So by far this has definitely been one of my favourite decks, Mysteria in general, for a core, and this variation I enjoy quite a bit. And with the rune on rune matchup, things should get fairly interesting. Next expansion is going to be a little more interesting because we don't really have a lot more going on for Rune. We've had a couple of Earth Rune support cards shown off, and we've probably actually pretty much completed the set at this point as of this video going up for you guys, but since I'm making this not quite a week in advance, we're not far off that though. Then we really don't have too much more to go. So Mysterian Wormist, not a surprise. This deck actually doesn't run that card. Probably because it's too clunky, you'd rather have draw power. I found that a lot actually. I've mainly been playing Wormist as a 2-drop 2-2 over playing it as a 6. Although if you were aiming for more of a burn Mysteria, I suppose that works, which is why you'd run something like Founder. This variation though, I feel does a much better job, and I believe runs no legendaries actually thinking about the deck list. So it's definitely a budget orientated deck as far as that goes, and considering it was one of the top World Grand Prix decks, it's definitely good. Can be a little high rolly, but considering and sorcery is your biggest win condition, that's not really a problem. You can flood board pretty easily, force your opponent to have to deal with it, and then just smack them in the face with an and sorcery, so really no issue there. It looks like they are taking the Magic Founder route, which is similar to the deck I've played most of this month, but switching over to this one I've definitely found to be a lot more enjoyable as far as playstyle goes and options. I feel like I always have a lot more options with this variation. So Feg has done a masterful job of this rune deck. I also believe Dorixlo was playing this deck, for anyone who's aware of who that is. He's been a pretty prominent member of the Shadowverse community as far as competitive decks go. I believe he was playing this variation at the start of the month, after the mini expansion, which is probably where Feg may have got the idea. I'm not saying he did, of course I don't have that kind of information, but it's very possible. Could be one of those great minds think alike situations. But either way, it's definitely an impressive deck, and to play it all the way up to number 1 in the world, definitely got to give props to him for that. Mysterian Circle into Fate's Hand. Okay, that's pretty acceptable. We'll take it. So as you've seen, most of this matchup has just been trying to draw, as I didn't really draw enough Mysteria cards. I was really lacking my Ands and Light Mages, so that's a little bit of a downfall for me at this point. All I could really do was just continue to draw cards as much as I could. At least we have got a few Mysteria cards to use if we do end up getting something that we can use. And Chain of Calling should do us a decent job of pulling something. And that's pretty perfect, honestly. We were going to need one sooner or later. So I decided to favour Face and use my final Evo point. Even though I probably should have held on to it for either Grey or a Light Mage, but I mean, when we get the chance to do this, considering we want to play Mysterian Prodigy as close to 10 as we can, I feel like that was going to be probably the safest bet I could make. So now I don't really have much else to do. Basically just play Anne, clear off the 2-2 with a insanely buffed Wind Blast. And hope that they don't have their own crazy Anne play, because if they do, that's where we're going to run into trouble. But it looks like they bricked about as hard as I did as far as getting Anne in your hand, so it's looking promising so far. So we do just need to worry about pretty much wiping this board now, which definitely is not impossible. We do a pretty decent job. We also got the damage and the heal, which I believe brings Anne's sorcery into range for lethal at 12 damage. So we avoided that very, very nicely. And that will allow us to take the victory. So a huge shout out to Feg and Potwasher, both number 1 and number 2 in the world respectively, which is an insane feat and some of the best Shadowverse I had ever seen. If you guys haven't checked out the World Grand Prix games, I definitely recommend looking them up and finding them. I'm sure by this stage they've probably been posted to YouTube, or they're probably still remaining on Twitch as some kind of VOD, which may have been kept. So definitely recommend checking those out, as they were very, very impressive matches, and this deck in particular in the finals just absolutely rolled one of the matches, which was insane to see it just go off. Probably more insane than Daria, honestly, as far as board flooding goes, so definitely worth a look. Otherwise, I hope you guys did enjoy this video. You'll find the deck list in the description below. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Until next time, see ya.